for today, I like to urge you all to remember that you can share your questions within the chat platform, and can also wait until the tail end of this webinar where you'll have a chance to ask the questions. But at this moment, I'll introduce Maria Laura, to first give us a brief overview of what this NGT regulation is in the was in the EU Parliament, and where it currently is at the moment. So Maria Laura.
Hi, thank you, Peter, for the introduction. Welcome, everybody, to this panel of discussion. Of course, to understand how the EU vote is going to affect the relationship between EU and Africa related to the genomic techniques, it's important to know how's the legislation process now. So I will share my screen with the presentation. Let's see. I cannot find, sorry, just a second. Yeah, here it is. Okay, do you see my screen?
Yes, you do, Maria.
Okay, just. Just a second. Okay, I think I can start presenting now. As we know, the EU has a new proposal on the plans obtained by certain new genomic techniques known as NGTs. Yeah. So as we know, the EU has a strict regulation on the GMOs, known as the GMOs directive. And for this reason, there has not been possibilities of introduce new GMOs products at the EU. We know that there are some varieties that has been growing in Spain and Portugal, and that there are all around 300 GMs products that are imported in the EU, but they are mainly for feed. However, and this legislation has been in the EU like for around 20 years. But then when all the research started and all this technology of the new genomic techniques started to develop, the breeder sector was really interested on what was going on here. So they asked the EU to analyze deeply the current legislation. So the member states also asked for studies to start, and there were some risk assessment studies and public consultations and also impact assessments. And at the end, the European Food Safety Authority said that there was not risk for the health or environment related to the new genomic techniques. So what the Commission said is that the current legislation was lagging behind scientific and technological progress. So they wanted to develop a new legislation that could facilitate the development and placing on the market of these new genomic products, and that farmers and consumers could benefit from the environment and benefits and all the advantages that these products have. So what they did is the EU Commission tabled a legislative proposal on the 5th of July in 2023. And this legislation was mainly to support the EU Farm to Fork and the biodiversity strategy. What they came with was two regulatory pathways, as we can see in this graphic. So there will be differentiated through the category 1 NGT plants that are equivalent to conventional, and also the category 2 that are not equivalent to conventional. So all these pathways would follow different requirements that you can see in this graph, but I will not go deeply into that. So after that, after the Commission tabled this proposal, following the decision-making process at EU level, it went to the Parliament and at the same time to the Council of the EU. So as you know, the Parliament represents what the desires of the civil society when they make policies. And this, at Parliament level, it went to the Committee of Environment, which through votes, they accepted this proposal, but of course with some amendments that were also tabled by the committee. And then on the 7th of February of this year, there was a plenary vote with all the members of the parliament, where the proposal was also adopted, as I said before, with some amendments to the legislation. And now the legislation is also at council level. However, the negotiations are still ongoing. So at this level, member states, and especially represented by the ministers of agriculture and fisheries, should reach an agreement. But this has not happened yet, and there has been delays because the negotiations, as I said, are still going, and there are some debates about main issues. So after the council reached an agreement, the three EU institutions should go to trialogues negotiations, where they're going to reach an agreement about the whole proposal, considering the proposal of the Commission, the amendments tabled by the Parliament, and also about the general approach reached by the Council. But we have not been reached this point yet. So what was agreed by the European Parliament? They agreed that the Category 1 NGT plants will be considered as conventional, so they will not follow the requirements of the GMO legislation. The NGT Category 2 will still follow some stricter requirements. There's some mandatory labeling, and there will be a public online list with all the NGT Category 1 plants. They have also proposed some traceability requirements throughout the value chain. Of course, we can say that this could maybe increase costs for farmers, because they will have to trace throughout the whole value chain until it reaches to the consumer. So maybe they will have to get more facilities so they can ensure the traceability. Also, they added a monetary plan. So if there is a possibility of withdrawal in case there's a risk to health or environment, the NGTs will remain prohibited in the organic production, but this will require further consideration. And there is a full ban on patents for all NGTs. So what about the Council of the EU? What we know is that the EU agriculture ministers still remain divided, so there's still a lot of debate ongoing through the member states. There's a lot of time pressures because, as you know, there will be elections on June this year and the European Parliament, so there are also farmers' protests going around. They are demanding for better income and better practices, and there's also a lot of information dissemination. What are the main concerns between the member states are this issue about patents, the food traceability and labeling, and the separation from organic. As we planned, we have also had some meetings with organic farmers that we know that would like to use the NGTs and organic farmers. So we have organic farmers that are pro, but there are also others that are against. So at member states level, there's still a lot of debate going on this topic. So what are the next steps on the EU institutions? We have to ensure that the Council reaches a general approach so the trilogues can start, the negotiations between the three institutions, and that the legislation can be approved. We want this to be before the 22nd of April, because as I mentioned, there will be elections. And if they don't reach an agreement before this date, then it will go to the next mandate. If it goes to the next mandate, so at council level now, it is led by the Belgian presidency. So if it doesn't come before this date, it will pass to the other presidencies. The next one is Hungary, and after that is Poland, that we know they're not really supportive for this legislation. And then we will have Denmark, that we know that this member states is really supporting for the NGT proposal to pass. So maybe we could have a positive approach here. But just after all of this process is been done, the legislation has to be adopted. and the EU Commission can develop the implementation plan that would take also 2 years more. So if we see these timelines and these years, we can see that there is still some time that has to, and some negotiation that has to be done for the legislation to be implemented. So I also wanted to show what's the impact that we have had as we planned on the process. So we wanted to influence the decision making at least at parliament level. So we had some meetings with key MEPs that helped us to know how the negotiations were going at parliament and the committee level. We were able to mobilize the scientific community. And with this, we had an open letter that was signed by 35 Nobel laureates and 1,000 scientists that were asking to the MEPs to back this new genomic techniques proposal. So we sent this letter to the member of the parliaments, and we were able to influence their vote for some key political parties that were still doubting about it. We were also able to mobilize more than 1,000 scientists in 14 countries. They were also asking for the MEPs to back this proposal. So at the end, as I said, on the 7th of February, the Parliament came out with a positive vote for this proposal. And we believe that what we did during this whole voting process influenced a lot the decision that was made at Parliament level. Actually, also our letter was mentioned, but some parliamentarians during a debate previous to the vote in plenary. So I just wanted to put these ideas. These are so general assumptions in case that this legislation is approved. So we know that there will be a greater recognition of NGTs as part of the sustainable agricultural practices at EU level. So more support and funding for NGTs related to research and development activities could increase, and there will be, of course, transfers of knowledge about this technology. We know that there will be international trade flows, because one of the amendments, it mentions that the regulation would not impede the import of NGT products to the EU if they follow what is mentioned on the regulation. So we also know that there's a lot of EU and Africa projects going, and maybe this will be a space for develop more projects on these genomic techniques. And between the two regions, they will be able to find locally adapted solutions to all the challenges that Africa is facing. So I see that here there's a lot of potential. Of course, there are still a lot of steps that should go, but maybe there's a lot of potential for the EU to increase the opportunities with the collaboration with Africa. Of course, the EU needs still a robust legal framework and policy coherence that would help to increase these opportunities. And I think there will be also more windows opened for more research to analyze more potential opportunities, and as well as challenges for the EU and Africa on this genomic techniques issue. So that's my presentation. I will stop sharing. Okay.
Thank you so much, Maria, for that introduction as to what this vote on NGTs is. And I think the next question that we should actually be answering is, what are these NGTs that you're talking about? And I'll leave this to Lina to explain a little bit about what NGTs are.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. Because I was wondering, like, if the whole EU voting and everything is presented, but the people doesn't know what the NGT is. So this is the new genomics tool. That's the full form of NGT. And so these are basically the techniques or the tools which scientists are using to make some precise small changes, or I will say just tweak a small level the genome of the plants for the improvement for the traits they are interested. And these are group of techniques. It's not only one. So there are tools like, zinc finger nucleases, mega nucleases, talents, and then more recently, it was CRISPR tool which was developed, which has become actually the most commonly applied tool for improving the plants, animals, livestock, even the human for the medicine therapy. So this is very important tool because, as I said, it only makes the small change in the endogenous genome, like now without transferring the foreign gene. So most of the time there is no foreign gene integration into the genome. So it's just the endogenous change and which gives the trait you are interested in. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Lina, for that explanation into NGTs. And I think you and Dr. Andrew combined have worked on some crops and developing new genomic techniques to edit these crops. And so maybe Dr. Andrew, you can tell us a little bit about some of the crops that you've worked on and that are currently under development in Africa.
Thank you, Peter, and thanks to WePlanet for setting up this webinar. I think it's a learning experience from all of us. I just learned a few things from Maria's presentation. Yeah, as you rightfully said, Lina and I and a few other groups around Africa are already embarking on using these NGTs to improve crops like cassava, crops like banana, and the banana mostly referring to cooking bananas, especially of the East African type that are a staple starch diet for many people in Eastern Africa. These crops are being improved for various constraints such as diseases and pests, but as well as resilience to climate factors like drought and the others. Other crops that are in the pipeline include rice. Rice also has a significant number of leaf diseases that constrain its productivity, as well as I think new attempts into some vegetables and things like that. So yeah, the list will increase, most especially now that the EU is beginning to think a little bit more scientifically at how to regulate new breeding tools. I think that partnerships with Europe and Africa will improve. The funding profile will increase, and more projects will address even more crops on the continent. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Andrew. And maybe Dr. Lina, you've worked on some gene-edited crops in the past. So tell us a little bit more about some of the crops that you've worked on.
Yeah, not in the past. I'm also working currently on the gene-edited crops. So I think let me just say a few things, even the question which you asked, Andrew. So, this is the technology, I will say, which is advancing very fast. You will see like a publication every week, so many publication, which you maybe not see in other technology. So it's very, very, and main reason to that is, is easy to adapt that technology. And that's why there is a lot of products in the pipeline. There are not that many has commercialized yet, because if you talk about the commercialized, there is like tomato from Japan, which is GABA rich, which can treat high blood pressure. But also in US, there is in the market the high oleic acid soybean oil. But very recently, there is a salad which is done by Pairwise, which is actually already people are consuming because it's already in the restaurants in US. But when it comes to the Africa, there is a lot in the pipeline. Globally, there are more than 40 crops actually where people are, there are reports that people are working. But then two crops which I would like to mention, which have more, 2 or 3 crops which has like advanced really in Africa. One of them is maize. For the maize lethal necrosis, that is one of the what I'll say, the pipeline product, because it's not released yet, but it has been approved for the field trial as non-GM in Kenya. And so this is basically knocking out of some of the genes for making it resistant to the viral disease. It's a combination of viruses which causes the maize lethal necrosis. The another one which is approved in Kenya as non-GM for the trial is Striga tolerant sorghum, which is also just knocking out one of the gene. Then my lab, we are focusing mainly on bananas and yam. These are the crop we are working on, and on banana, our focus is basically the disease resistance. So our very first report which we worked on the virus disease. So in this case, this virus is a streak virus when virus infect the plant, this viral genome actually gets integrated into the plant genome. And it becomes like part and parcel of the banana genome. And then, when the plants are stressed, maybe the high rise in temperature or drought, then, these plants start showing the symptom because the viral genome, which is part of the banana genome, gets activated. So that was our first project, which we embarked on very early, like 2015. And then we have shown that, without touching the plant, we can still solve this problem. So what we did was we just make some small changes in the viral genome, which was integrated into the banana genome. And in the end, we developed the plants where these viruses were not activated, and then the plants became resistant. Then we also moved further to the other important diseases for the region, which is one of them is the bacterial disease. As Andrew mentioned, banana is an important staple food crop for East Africa, particularly the cooking type of those green matuke varieties. And so this disease is really devastating. So what we did was, there are some genes which are involved in developing the disease symptom. When the pathogen infect the plant, that's when, these genes gets activated, and then, the plants start developing the symptoms. So what we did was that, we tried to knock out those genes, so that the plant doesn't develop symptom. And then, we have made very good progress. We have knocked out few genes, and then one at a time, we just knock out one gene. When I say knockout, we have just deleted a single or maybe two base pairs, not any big deletion or not inserting anything from other crop species. And so they have given us, we have tested in the greenhouse, we challenged them with the bacterial pathogen, and they have given us the resistance against the bacterial wilt disease. Another global important disease is the Fusarium wilt, because that's affecting the banana plantation globally. So that's another disease we are working on. We are also working on yam. We are trying to develop some yam with the improved traits which are important for the farmers. Yeah, I'll stop here. Peter, back to you.
Thank you, Lina, for that description of the different crops that are under the new being edited under the new genomic techniques. And it's great to see that even Kenya and Africa as a continent is moving forward. Maybe at this point, I'd like to ask that you all head on to our social media, like and follow our pages, and also sign up to our newsletter. You can sign up using our website at WePlanet on all social media, WePlanet Africa on all social media pages, and our website is weplanetafrica.org. So maybe now we can move on to Maria, and you can tell us that maybe does this vote on NGTs have any potential any potential impact on the regulatory landscape in Africa?
Sorry. Yes. So as we know, the decisions that are made at EU level has sometimes a lot of impact outside the region to other countries, especially to developing countries where the EU has relationships, let's say, for trade agreements. So we know that the EU and Africa has a lot of development agreements and trade agreements going on. So what is decided here, especially in terms of international trade, would affect what happens in Africa. As you has mentioned, and the other panelists has mentioned, there is a lot of research going on in Africa that because you want to benefit from all the environmental and social and economic benefits from NGTs, and as if they are produced already in Africa, you would also like to have it expand to other territories, let's say to the EU. So what is decided here in the EU will also impact the economy and Africa. So I think if the legislation is approved here, it will open a lot of windows for more trade agreements to be developed with Africa, and because the NGTs will be part of the language of sustainable agriculture practice, but also not only on trade, but also on research and knowledge transfers, as I mentioned before. So we know that there's a lot of projects going on, especially through the Horizon Europe pillars, that they want to enhance cooperation with African partners on public health, green transition, innovation, technology, and research. So this legislation would be as an open door to do more on research and to jump from the lab, where now the things are happening, to go to the field, so that both regions can benefit from the application of this innovation.
Thank you, Maria, for that. And I'll pose the same question to Dr. Andrew. And how do you feel that this vote on NGTs is going to impact the regulatory landscape of African countries?
Yeah, thank you, Peter. I see a little bit of a mix here and there as the status already is. The regulatory profile or landscape in Africa is a mix. It's a range from where countries do not even know what's going on to countries that are making very, very significant progress. And I think those countries that are making progress in terms of having legislation already addressing NGTs, perhaps even ahead of Europe. You know, countries like Kenya, Ghana, Nigeria, that are already reviewing and making decisions on applications for research and also for development of products are way ahead of Europe. And I think that some learning might come from this direction. But I think that we have groups of NGOs who are going to learn a little bit more. You know, I think that they are going to find space to appreciate the evolution of genetic tools, those that have still been insisting on GMOs as direct introductions of genes from other species and trying to create the resistance around just those concepts. We'll have opportunity to learn that, well, there's new tools and science grows, and that the EU is already starting to think about the new tools for which a bit of more science thought and decision are needed. So we will see a little bit of, I think, more acceptable tools, more acceptable products, especially in agriculture, crop agriculture. But we're already seeing a lot, as you might already know. We're already seeing a lot in the veterinary and human aspects of health that are using these new tools. So I think all in all, it's going to be positive. There'll be more
I think we've lost Dr. Andrew, but as we wait for him to join us.
Sorry, can I add something, Peter? Just
Sure,
some commenting. Yeah, as Dr. Andrews said, that the EU is now looking at how the other countries are doing and how they are moving forward to embrace the benefits of NGTs. And the EU, I think, is understanding more how the agriculture sector is working now and all the challenges that it's facing now. So I think that could be a good step to approve these NGTs. But also, as he said, there will be some organizations that are against the technology, not only at EU level, but also Africa and some around the world, because these innovations are bringing changes. So sometimes people, community in general, are resistant to the changes, and there's some fear about these new things that are coming or that they are already there in the market. So I think as we plan it, I can say that as we plan it, because we're in contact with the civil society and with other stakeholders, it is important to have a proper science communication so that people can really understand what we are talking about. So in a proper language that it's easy for people to understand, and also for policymakers to understand, not only here in Europe, but in Africa as well, so that they can assimilate that the NGTs is something that can help to bring a more sustainable agriculture. So just wanted to add that.
Awesome. You've mentioned something on changes, and maybe Dr. Lina, you can tell us, like, from these changes, how do we as the African consumers and farmers stand to benefit from these NGTs? With as much changes that you're doing to the gene, what benefit do we as consumers accrue? You're muted.
Sorry, I was muted. Yeah. So, Peter, that's very good question. I will say that now, if you see, everyone has two big challenges right now, like how to feed the growing population, because the population is increasing, right? And when it comes to the Africa, is even increasing more. And so that means, like, we have to double our production, like 50 to 60% more production before we will be able to feed everyone. And then on top of that, we have issues with the climate change as well, because, you see there is a rise in temperature. There is so much uncertainty in rain, like you have seen in Kenya, how it's going on, but that is not only Kenya, in other part of the world as well. So, this NGTs are the tools for helping breeders for developing this new varieties. Means I will focus more on agriculture, because you talk about consumer and the farmers. So you see, like, I will say that gene editing, which we more commonly call gene editing, right, for NGTs, is not new. It has been happening in the nature before. So even in the before, there were some changes happening spontaneously, and then farmers were selecting those varieties. But now, with the development of these tools, these changes are more precise. So we know what we are making the changes. Like, if you want a disease resistant, you will only change that trait, and that trait will not change anything related to taste or related to nutrition, because your target is only the improvement in the disease resistance. And so this is one of the tool which is actually helping a conventional breeding, because now this is like basically accelerating the breeding, because the breeders which they were achieving in, let's say, in 7-8 years, maybe they can reduce few years by using this. So the production cost will go down, right? And then it has, if the way Kenya has adopted this regulatory guideline, based on that guideline, if a final product has no foreign gene integration, then these products are not treated as GMO. So, you don't have to do that so much extensive biosafety risk assessment, which is very costly. So you are reducing the cost and time for developing these varieties. So consumer will have more varieties, maybe more choices, I will say. And then because I only gave example of disease, but then, there is also nutrition enhancement. Many people are working in, like, in like there is a report where they have done biofortification using gene editing. So they have enhanced beta carotene. So which is like also nutrition enhancement. So the consumer will get more nutrition, more diversity. And you have to also consider the factor, if a crop is not producing enough, in the end, it will go expensive in the market, right? Or if there are losses because of the disease, the price in the market will go up because there is that crop is in demand, but there is not that much production. So I think that will be the benefit for the consumer, that they, without paying much extra cost, they will have improved varieties. And then for the farmers has lot of benefits, because if they use the disease resistant varieties, in that case, they don't need to use pesticide, they don't have to, they have higher production. So in the end, they have high income, and so that's because many smallholder farmers, these crops are the livelihood. So right, so they have better livelihood because of these tools. But one point which I would like to say, none of the tool is a silver bullet. So not one tool will resolve all the problem. The challenges we are facing, we have to use these tools in combination with the conventional tools in order to increase the production to 60 to 70% to close the yield gap of the important crops for Africa, but beyond globally also. Yeah, back to you, Peter.
Thank you, Dr. Lina. And you are looking forward to seeing more cheaper crops that have the same or even more nutritional value. And maybe, Dr. Andrew, thank you for joining us. You can give us insight on how the African consumer stand to benefit from these gene editing technologies.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. Sorry about the mishap. I'm seeing, I think Lina's spoken about it briefly, but there's a lot of crops, there's a lot of, especially green leafy vegetables and native species that African consumers are very fond of, either for traditional pride and people pride about their traditional crops and foods. And a lot of these are not producing sufficiently. They are susceptible to disease, they are low yielding, and because of that, they are forced to adopt other introduced vegetables. I think this is the beginning of opportunities to improve native species and make them productive enough and to be able to sustain the demand for these species. So that I see as a fundamental benefit. But also, I think we are growing towards appreciating that if some of these NGT tools or techniques can deliver improvement without necessarily introducing big chunks of DNA, we are getting closer to producing organically with genetically enhanced products. So even those in the organic movement need to look back and say, well, look at this genetics. It is genetics based on repair, for example, of lost function, and we have restored function and created resistance, and therefore less use of pesticides and chemicals. I'm looking at a time when organic production brings on board products of NGTs.
Thank you so much, Dr. Andrew. And maybe the next question that I'll pose it to Laura. And maybe you can tell us from a policy perspective, and what opportunities do you think exist for collaboration and technology transfer, especially in the field of NGTs between Africa and Europe?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so as I mentioned before, I know there are already projects going on these topics at EU level. There's a lot of research going on this topic, but they cannot move forward because yeah, we don't have still a legislation that will regulate these genomic techniques. So I know there are also collaborations, projects of collaboration with Africa on research and innovation. So this can help to go forward and just not do the research and just stop there, but also to transfer the knowledge, to be able to open the dialogue between not only between researchers, but also between policymakers, to see how what is decided at the EU level can influence the decisions and the plans at Africa level. And also the projects and the funds will be also around these practices, because the EU is trying to develop it more in its territory. So of course the EU is always trying to promote the inclusive growth and development of other countries. So I believe that the EU and the authorities here and all the research institutions will try also to help other countries to boost the production of NGTs, and that they can also benefit for the benefits for farmers and for consumers. As Dr. Lina said, it will not be like the silver bullet, but it will be part of the package to tackle all these challenges in the environment and also in the food security.
Thank you, Maria, for that response. At this point, I'll ask if there are any questions from the audience regarding NGTs and their policy implication.
Peter, if I can respond to John Odipio's question, he put it in the chat that Africa countries that decide to copy EU in their biotechnology NGT product process regulation now need to reprioritize their national development plans. So what I will say here, things are already changing. I think now maybe is the time, as Andrew also mentioned previously, maybe Europe has to learn from Africa. Because like you see, many countries, including Kenya, Nigeria, these were much on the forefront of this technology and for the development of the regulatory guidelines. So I can talk more about Kenya because that's where I was following from the starting, or I'll say I was engaged as a stakeholder from the starting. So Kenya developed science-based policy without getting influence with one country or one area, region or another. So in the starting, they did the consultation with all different places, including US, Canada, Europe, Argentina, India. There were a lot of consultations happen, but they followed Argentina, not Europe, because they really wanted, they have seen that, this technology, these tools has potential, and they really want to get the full potential, utilize the full potential of those tools. And you cannot utilize the full potential of tools until a country has the regulatory guideline. And then on the next to the guideline, I will say is the responsibility like we plan it, because any time when there is a new technology, people have fear. And, that's when the public awareness comes in. How many people know what technology? People know, okay, this is something, a new animal come in, but what's that new animal, So you need to explain very well by explaining but then what I will say that John, many countries are already using different paths. I'm not talking about generalizing, because I know some countries like, Kenya, Nigeria, Ghana, Malawi, and there are a lot. The list is big, like Ethiopia, Burkina Faso. There are many countries which are actually developing these guidelines, science-based, rather than influenced by one region or another. Back to you, Peter.
Thank you so much, Lina. And I think it's one thing that has stood out is that Europe can now take a step and actually learn from Africa. And that is one way of us leading the way in terms of NGTs. For now, it's just a reminder that you can follow us on our social media pages. That is Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram at WePlanet, and also subscribe to our newsletter to get the latest updates onto what you're doing. At this moment, I'll share a simple appreciatory video to celebrate African women in science who are using new breeding technique. And this is in partnership with Science Stories Africa.
On the 11th of February 2024, we celebrate these women in science.
Cheers. Cheers. Cheers for you. This is for you, Jesus.
So those are a few of the women who are working in the fields of NGT. We have Lina here with us and many more out there still doing the work. At this moment, I think just a reminder that you'll receive the recording to this webinar in your emails, and also a link to subscribe to our newsletter. So thank you so much for coming. And I think we can call it an end at this moment. Thank you to our panelists, Dr. Lina, Maria, and Dr. Andrew. It's been an amazing session, and we've really learned a lot on the policy implications of the NGT votes in Europe on Africa. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, Peter.
too.
Thanks, WePlanet, for it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.